Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Denver, co-host here at the Radio Rendezvous, which we do with our partner Seth Ressler every couple of weeks. And we are happy to welcome someone who I have just terrific respect for, and you do too. He's been a constant in the world of Nielsen for many, many years with us. I'd like to welcome Jon Miller, who's the Nielsen VP of Audience Insights. Welcome, Jon. How are you today?
Hey, Joel. I'm great. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to speak with you.
Nice to speak with you, too. And we want to thank our sponsors, Point to Point, Key Networks, Sun and Fun Media, Radio Cloud, Radio.Cloud, RCS, The Imaging House, and our media partners at RAMP for helping us make this happen all the time. So, you have changed the world of radio, and that's a good thing. Let's talk about this 3-minute rule. How long did you study this change to the 3-minute rule before it was implemented?
Sure. Well, I think this is worth calling out. This was record setting for Nielsen. So, Nielsen's like a battleship. It takes us a while to turn sometimes. But we went from inception to implementation. Excuse me. We went from inception to implementation in under 8 months. So less than a year, which if you know Nielsen, you've been working with us for a long time. We tend to move at a slower pace because there's lots of things you have to do. You have lots of committees and clients and agencies to get approval. And that was the great thing about this idea was everybody was on board with it. It made sense. It was easy to do for Nielsen, and it's bringing benefit already to the radio industry. It's going to bring benefit to advertisers. So, we're enjoying this brief moment of, look how fast we did this for the industry, and we're really excited about it.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's the truth. We'd all heard about it, and then all of a sudden, bam, it was a reality. So, is it possible at this point? Can you compare the January book, the first 3-minute rule book, to the May 24th, 3-minute rule data that was used as an example? And what differences are there that Nielsen has seen between January 25th and May 24th? Does this comparison meet any expectations?
The blanket answer is yes, it does. However, what we have been focusing on right now, now that we have our first month, is we're looking back to last January. And as this goes, as we get February and March, we're going to change our perspective. This is new for us as much as it is the industry, trying to figure out, what makes the most sense to do a comparison. So I'll go back and say that the impact data that we shared with the industry was based on May of last year. And what we did there is we said, here was the original May numbers based on the 5-minute rule that you've known for decades. And here's what it would have been had we gone to the new 3-minute rule. And so that was kind of a, direct one-to-one comparison. We're not doing that now moving forward. We have switched over to 3 minutes in January. There's not a 5-minute version of January. What we're doing, Joel, is we're saying, where were we a year ago and how does that compare? And when you consider all the nuances and all the math, the expectations are definitely being met. So what I'll say to that is, when we did the May data, we saw about a 20% increase, 20% more average audience across the board, across demos, day parts, things like that, right? When you go from 5 minutes to 3, you capture more occasions, you capture longer listening occasions, you capture more impressions. That's the key point for advertisers. Is that 20% difference showing up in January to January, year to year? Not exactly. Because remember, there's attrition. There's the normal year-to-year change in radio listening. People use different things. That's happening to all linear media right now. The amount of people using radio, using TV year-to-year is declining. So when you factor all of that stuff in, yes, we are seeing what we expected. But when you look at a hard number, Jan to Jan, it's a 14% difference. January 25 is 14% higher than January 24. And that, again, makes logical sense because there probably was 8 or 9% attrition that happened over the course of the year of people leaving the medium. So that's a long answer, a lot of math in there. But in general, yes, we are pleased and we are seeing what we expected to see in the data.
That's excellent. Really good. So is radio happy with the results? I would think they would be. And how about advertisers and media buyers so far?
In general, yes. Again, it's early. It's the first quarter here. It's it's the first third of the first quarter. It's just the 1 month of January. So a lot of analysis, a lot of discussions with clients. But yes, in general, people are excited. Mileage, of course, varies in individual markets, individual stations. And so that's what we're busy doing is helping our clients understand, why is my station lower this month or things like that. And that's the thing. While this is a huge change and it's a big influence, it's not the only thing moving the numbers. There's all the other factors of life that move radio listening around, weather and news and sports and traffic and holidays and all the, million things that we've learned over the years that change your radio habits. That's all still happening. We've just changed the rule in the background. So lots more to come, more months to digest. And as we get more data, we're going to learn even more. That's the exciting part for us, for someone like me, is, we have some findings about formats so far. We have some findings about day parts, but it's just 1 month. So I want to see what the other months show as well, because the old saying at Nielsen is 1 month does not make a trend. We need a couple months to really wrap our heads around it.
Yeah, you helped out with a few questions I was going to ask you down the road here. But from Radio Wink, Dentsu Group Director of Audio Activation, Diana Anderson, in a recent article, called this update a crucial step in modernizing radio's measurement and aligning it more closely with digital metrics. And Harmelin Media VP Director of Research and Consumer Insights, Bernie Shimkus, questioned whether this update would improve advertisers' ability to directly attribute conversions to radio ads. However, he later acknowledged that it strengthens radio's position by providing a more accurate picture of audience engagement. That's really good press. And then Inside Radio, their headline today was Top Stations 25 to 54 shares rise 8%. And I say today, meaning when we recorded this. So top stations 25-54 shares rise 8% under new AQH rule. That's got to make you feel great.
Of course. Yeah. And I think the key there is some of those quotes from Diana and Bernie. Advertisers, what does this mean for them? Well, the bottom line is we are now capturing more impressions. That was one of the biggest reasons why we did this. Measurable ad impressions are going to increase. It's going to be capturing more credit for commercial listening than was previously being measured. And as you said, Joel, in a digital world, you can be on something for a second and be counted as an impression. And here was radio, using a 5-minute rule that was more than 50 years old. And ironically, you might have already heard this. It's just funny how life works and numbers match up. Math explains the world. The median uncredited occasion that we picked up, when you look at PPM before we made this change, we said, well, what does it look like today? What do all the occasions look like? Versus 5 minutes, 7, whatever. The median uncredited occasion length was 3 minutes. So that was already happening, right? People are using radio in shorter bursts because people use all media in short bursts, especially if you're younger. So that was a red flag that stood out to us and said, this makes sense to drop that rule, to bring it down to 3 minutes. And as a result, we're going to capture more impressions. We're going to give advertisers more choice. Programmers are going to be able to think a little differently about where they put their spots now, because everything that you did before was based on those 5-minute rules. And there was, the bow tie and the hourglass and all the strategies for putting your stop sets. Now you can rethink some of that. So that's part of the really exciting part of all of this.
Are the results living up to or exceeding expectations in average quarter hour, average persons in Cume at this point?
Sure. I think they're meeting the expectations. Again, it's just the 1 month. When you're doing a year-over-year comparison, you have to be aware of the attrition. But I'll give you a couple of stats. What we've seen so far is that there's growth in all day parts and all demos. Some are bigger than others. Mileage will vary. But so far in just January, we're noticing that the drive times and the weekends are seeing even bigger increases. So there's gains everywhere, but morning drive, afternoon drive, and weekends are seeing a little bit bigger gains. So a little bit more audience being captured there. And, the thing is, that audience was always there, right? All we've done is just change the rule in the background. So there were always people listening to your station for a couple minutes at a time. We just weren't capturing them before. Now we are with this new rule. So that's part of the discussion we have with advertisers. It's well, is this going to make radio more effective? Well, sure, from a numbers perspective, it will. You'll see more impressions, and more impressions will feed into marketing mix models, and that will be better for all of those elements. But you were already reaching those people. We just maybe didn't capture it. You were already getting those ears to hear the message. So I think that's part of just the broad level thinking we want to make sure we keep in mind.
That's excellent. I think it's a situation where all boats can rise from this change. Myself, that's my gut positive feeling about it. So, is the new listening coming more from Cume or P1s, or has all the growth been TSL, or has it oddly benefited Cume too?
So, in just our first month, we're seeing it's mainly coming from longer time spent listening. So. That's what we've seen just in January. Remember, January is a low month historically for radio listening. It's one of the lower months of the year.
Right.
Radio listening peaks in the spring, and in the fall. And then in the holiday January time, it's usually a bit lower for a lot of reasons that make a lot of sense. So that's why we want more data. We want to see February, we want to see March. We expect those months to trend a little higher. But to answer your question, Joel, in January, the gains were mostly driven by time spent. Cume was up a little bit, but time spent was up like 10%. And that, again, makes sense. You're capturing longer occasions. You're adding on a couple more minutes now because of the new rule. Yes, you're capturing some listeners that weren't there already, but in general, you're adding a little more minutes, a few more minutes, excuse me, to the people that were already listening. So that's what's been driving it so far in the first month.
That's great news. What formats are benefiting most? Are there any formats that are benefiting the least that you can see in a trend yet?
Again, it's just that first month. We're seeing things that we've expected. Ironically, the format that was up the most year over year was all news. Think about what happened in this January news-wise. Think about what happened in California. Think about the ongoing political news cycle that we now live in. So that makes a lot of sense, right? That all news and news talk would be pretty far up. Some of the Spanish language formats were also a little higher because we saw big gains in this first month with Hispanic listeners, excuse me. But again, the rising tide, everyone's going up. It just varies a little bit. But so far, news has been up and Spanish language formats have been up a bit as well.
Very good. Any markets under or overperforming that are a surprise to you?
Well, again, you're doing a year-to-year comparison of just 1 month. There were two markets. Atlanta and Baltimore were actually lower this January than they were last January. Maybe they had a big year last year. Maybe the Ravens were deep in the playoffs last year. There's a million reasons why radio could have been different year to year, but that was it. Everybody else was up. And similar to what we saw in the impact data that we already presented, it tends to trend toward like Western markets, maybe younger skewing markets as well. And that makes sense, right? Those are the listeners. People that are younger consumers are more likely to listen in shorter bursts than people that are older. So we learned that back during our impact data was that markets that have like a higher propensity or a higher population of younger population tend to do a little better when you bring 3 minutes into the equation. And that's what we're seeing here. So, markets like Phoenix, San Diego, Austin, Riverside, Seattle, those are some of the markets that saw the most growth in just this first month.
Very good. Any tweaks that you can think of or you've already started to think about that need to be made in this formula, or is it just going to let it fly as it is right now?
Well, it was just a rule change in the back end, which was also one reason why we were able to do it so quickly. We didn't have to rewrite a lot of code. We didn't have to rewrite our software. Average quarter hour is still the currency, right? A rating point is still a rating point. So all of that stuff remained unchanged. It's just that back end rule that flows into crediting. So no, we've done the homework and done the diligence there. That was part of that 7-month period I told you about. All the internal testing we did to make sure that this didn't break anything or didn't have unintended consequences with other parts of our system. So that's all running smoothly as is. I think, Joel, now the challenge is just how do we help communicate this to the industry? How do we teach it? How do we help people learn the new way of radio listening? How do we help programmers, interpret and comprehend the data? And then lastly, how do we help sell this into the advertising community? That's the end game here is, bringing the benefits to them, the better impressions and the more choice. And so I think that's the really big part.
So looking at PPM overall, the technology and the methodology and such, are we continuing to see a decline in PUM?
Yes. Radio listening, just like all other linear media, is continuing to decline slowly. It's seasonal. It goes up and down certain months. But over time, it is declining. That's why this was such a big, a great timing to do this now. Because we know it's going to boost the audience. It's kind of like a trend break. That's what I describe it as. January 25 is now a trend break. So everything prior to that was based on 5 minutes. So if you're making those long-term trends, you have a new trend now starting with this year. So, but Joel, over time, listening will continue declining in small amounts because that's just the way the world is going right now. So, that's why we're focused on bringing this to the marketplace, helping the industry understand it, working with our partners at the RAB, for example. They're doing such great work, doing webinars about this, lots of materials. We just want everyone to, have their head around what this means so that in the end, we can hopefully bring more money to radio.
There you go. You're not expecting pump levels to level off at any point then at this point, right?
Anything's possible. It's hard to predict the future, but every year since 2011, when ppm was invented and went into play, every year since then we've seen a slight decline over the course of the year in listening levels. And again, that's not unique to radio. Our brethren in live TV at Nielsen are facing the exact same type of things. Do individual events happen and spike listening and viewing? Of course they do. Sports and news and weather and all those things I mentioned before. But yeah, over time, we see that slow decline. So it's hard to say what will happen in the future, but that's what we've seen for the past 14 years here at Nielsen.
Let me ask you something a little, off the subject, but germane to what we're talking about. Tell me the impact of wearables at this point.
Sure. Well, the good news is they are impacted. They are fully wearable. So our ppm panels today are 100% wearables. There are no more pager devices out there anymore. We used to call the ppm 360. Yeah, we finished that up. I believe last year is when the final wearable got installed. So everywhere you look in ppm markets, it's a wearable device. It can be on a watch pendant. It can be something you wear on a chain or a lanyard. It's not a pager. Again, it's a wearable device about the size of like your watch face. So that's great because it's easier to carry. It's not as cumbersome. Technology is better. It communicates back to Nielsen in more efficient ways. We have apps that we let people use now to communicate with us about their experience in the panel. So that's all been going on behind the scenes, but we are 100% wearable right now. And what I will tell you is like other parts of Nielsen are now moving to the wearable as well because it's such a good technology. So the TV panel is beginning to move towards wearables. So, that's one reason why Nielsen bought Arbitron all those years ago was they wanted that technology. So that's a long way of saying, Joel, we're very happy with the wearable and it provides us the most robust sample, the most robust panel, and it is the future. I don't think we're going to ever go to an app per se. We've pursued that for years and answered questions about that for years, but having a standalone device introduces the least amount of bias into the ratings. And so we're very happy with the wearable right now.
Right. I was going to ask you about the app thing. I mean, SoundHound and Shazam both can monitor in the background and tag automatically. You can't adapt that technology to an app, huh?
It could be. We've just always felt that to meet our rigorous standards, our measurement standards, that a standalone device is the way to go. The MRC agrees with that. Other industry bodies agree with that. Sure, it could be done. Anything can be done.
Right.
But you have, battery impact issues. You have microphone issues, right? That's a small, like often overlooked nuance. The microphone in the wearable is far superior to what you and I have on our phones, even with today's amazing iPhones and things like that. So there's just a number of reasons like that we've always stayed on the path of an individual device. And I think, again, anything's possible. Who knows where Nielsen will go in the future? But, we've put so much time and money into the wearable that, for right now, that is our future for measurement.
There you go. Anything you want to add here? This has been a terrific conversation, Jon.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do it. Maybe we could speak again in a few months when we have a couple more months of data under our belt, because
that would be great.
We're beginning to look at different formats, and even inside there, like what's happening with P1 usage. Some of the nitty gritty stuff that programmers really like to get into. I will share that you had asked me in our prep emails about are you seeing differences in like occasions versus time spent per occasion? And what we're seeing is they're both going up right now. We're getting more occasions out of listeners, but the time spent is increasing because that's just the general headline, right? This is grabbing more time spent by going to 3 minutes. You're crediting those extra couple of minutes that were already there, but we weren't counting previously. Now we're grabbing that, we're counting it. So time spent listening is up, 10, 12, 15%, depending on what you look at. And that is the same for P1 as well as for general. So those are early findings, Joel. Again, only 1 month of data under our belts, but I'll be fascinated to watch how that develops as we roll out the first quarter of this.
Yeah. One last question. How are you addressing sample size, which everybody complains about?
Sure. So, this doesn't change anything there. This doesn't change negative or positive the sample sizes. sample size in each market is a static number. That's what the wearable is designed to do. Sure, everybody wants more sample. It is, of course, more expensive to do more sample, and there is no guarantee that you get higher ratings if you do more sample. You just get more sample. All of that said, remember, we work with the MRC, we work with all kinds of industry bodies and committees, and we feel that we're at a good spot right now with our sample sizes.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, there may be things that will happen at Nielsen that can change that. There might be combination of panels. Who knows? And Nielsen is one of those companies that's always looking for other ways to be more efficient and to bring you better measurements. So who knows? I think that's one of those places where anything is possible, right?
Right.
Maybe Nielsen one day will want to combine TV and radio panels together, and that could boost sample size tremendously.
Absolutely.
But for right now, our sample size is unchanged, and we feel good about it.
Right. You mentioned MRC. How do you get full accreditation in all of the PPM markets?
Yeah, great question. I don't have an answer there. That's definitely not my pay grade. But you continue working with the MRC like we always do. Full engagement, full transparency.
Right.
As you know, there are a number of markets that have never been accredited. I mean, we're in year 15 of PPM. We're still buying and selling off that data, but at the same time, we continue to work with the MRC and make sure that we're answering their questions, and we'll see what happens.
Very good. Thank you, Jon Miller. He's the Nielsen VP of Audience Insights. Really appreciate your time and your insight today, and you can count on an updated interview in a few months or so, but we get a little more data under our belts for you, and you can address other questions that I'm sure will come up in the ensuing months ahead. So thank you again, Jon. Terrific talking with you today.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Great to see you.